Kia ora and welcome to this episode of the Niche Cast, where myself and the Wobbly Wildcard from the Niche Case chat through some Kiwi sporting stuff. We've got a bit of housekeeping, Kiwi sporting updates, and probably spend the bulk of this episode chatting through the variety of Blackcaps squads and pretty much all things Blackcaps T20 related leading into the T20 World Cup in a month or two. The best way to support the Niche Case is on Patreon, and we're incredibly grateful for our patrons. And if you do want to support the Niche Case straight up the guts, join the Patreon whānau, patreon.com/elnichecase, EL Niche Case, and you get a good karma boost. And when a big event rolls around, we do the almost daily podcast for our patrons as well. Every Monday and Friday, we send out our Substack email, which you can sign up to if you go to thenichecase.substack.com and then whack in your email, and you basically get all the Niche Case stuff straight to your email, no social media, on a Monday and Friday, and there's always a couple extra yarns, bonus yarns in those emails as well. And of course, we are always writing about Kiwi sports at theniche-case.com. Wobbly Wildcard, do you have a dose of mindfulness to start the show?
Always got to get dosed to start the show. Short and sweet this time. It is going back to the well of Mr. Ram Dass, who said, "As long as you're reaching for it, then you'll never get enough."
Does that wind back to the content, grateful, like whatever you have is enough type of stuff?
Yeah, certainly could. And also just like because it's two sides of the same coin, isn't it? It's saying like, if you're reaching for something that you don't have, which I guess the most obvious way in which we see this is like just in rich people never have enough money kind of thing. They're always wanting more, and that applies in many different areas as well. But yeah, at the same time, like if you're scoping out there for something that you don't have in order to find some kind of completion, you're never going to get it. But then the flip side of that, of course, would be what you're just saying, which is like, if you can't, like, how do I say this? If you don't have it and you're trying to gain it, and then that's not enough, well, then obviously what is enough is what you already have. Like, find peace with the way things are rather than trying to change them, that kind of thing. I think I got around to the point I was trying to make there. I'm not sure.
Well, you can't go wrong with finding peace with the way things are. And in the variety show, you asked about the post-Olympic kind of the buzz, what we're moving on to after the Niche Case in sports. I think you can try and channel a lot of these mindfulness ideas into sport, but such is the nature of sports and athletes that there is always something else. Now, don't want to get too deep into that analogy because it's a minefield, I think. I'm kind of realizing that as I say it. But sports is moving along. And I'm sure all these athletes and teams are content with who they are and what they have, but there's that inner drive to always do more. And that goes back to maybe the growth. There's always, from a mindfulness angle, you're always trying to learn, you're always trying to grow. So you can still be content and at peace with what you have and the way things are, while always trying to move forward and progress and grow. You bigged up Abby Erceg like a week or so ago. She was part of the Football Ferns, then she went straight back to the United States of America, and like in a couple of days she was playing another game. I think it's for Kansas over in the USA.
North Carolina, yeah. Katie Bowen's at Kansas, so you weren't far wrong there.
Now we have Lydia Ko. A week after she won the bronze medal at the Tokyo Olympic Games, she is about to tee off at the Scottish Open over in Scotland. And so that's roughly a week. Last week, she became the first ever human to win 2 golf medals at the Olympics. This week, She is back on tour over in Scotland, about to start the Scottish Women's Open. So I am eager to see how that pans out. How did Abby Erceg's immediate return to North Carolina go?
It's gone decent. I think they had a draw first up and then a real gritty, sort of gutsy 1-0 win where the team wasn't at their best, but sort of got the important 3 points in the second game back. So it's not just her as well that's coming back. Obviously, they've got like other Olympians from other nations have been filtering back, and hopefully by next game they'll have their Americans and Canadians and such back as well, because it's one of those things where the NWSL should have taken a break during the Olympics, but didn't take a break during the Olympics, so the tables got real wonky, and teams like North Carolina, who were doing very well before the Olympics, lose like half their starting 11 for a month, and then suddenly find themselves like tumbling towards the, like, maybe even dropping out of the playoff spots altogether, and they're back up, I think, to second or something now as it stands. So yeah, the ship has been steadied.
Prior to the Olympics, Lydia Ko had a tied 6th. Then she won the bronze, which is a 3rd place. So she's got 2 top 10 finishes in her last 2 tournaments. Now she's back over in the Scottish Open. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. We had a little Steven Adams sighting at Summer League in the NBA as part of the Memphis Grizzlies crew. And we're all big Grizzlies fans now, so just remaining intrigued about what happens there. Big news on the Kiwi NRL front as well. We have 3 more Kiwi NRL debutants. Shout out to Makahisi Makatoa, who is on the bench for the Parramatta Eels. He is from New Plymouth. I think he is a Marist junior down in New Plymouth. I think they're the Marist Dragons or something like that. Makahisi Makatoa has been a bit of a reserve grade journeyman for a few years. I think he started out with the Bulldogs, then he spent time in the Canberra system, and now he's with the Eels, and he's getting his debut. So I mentioned him first because he's a bit different to the others. He's a bit older, a bit more of that journeyman vibe, but he is still hearty Kiwi NRL from New Plymouth. Good geographic variety there within Aotearoa. And he'll be debuting for the Parramatta Eels hopefully on Saturday night. That comes after, this is a little bit more exciting for me, we have Nofahu White making his debut off the bench for the Roosters. And he is a Kelston Boys high school product. He's a Waitemata Seagulls junior. He's been in the Roosters system since he was at Kelston Boys College. And there's a good video that I've tweeted out before. If you search Kelston versus Aotearoa College First 15, I think it was from 2019, you can see Viliami Vailea playing for Aotearoa College, and you can, on the Kelston team, you've got Naufahu White, and I think you've also got the Warriors prospect Zion Mai'uu, who was also in that First 15 team back in 2019. He is still in the Kelston Boys First 15 team, so he's an absolute beast. But yes, Naufahu White, he's been in the Roosters system for a few years now, and he has been named on the bench for the Roosters in this game. The Roosters have a lot of Kiwi NRL prospects to keep an eye on. The Moala Graham twins. You've also got this guy Asso Fretton, who was homies with White at Kelston Boys. He's part of the Roosters system as well. And this game is interesting because the Broncos have Jordan Ricky starting, young Kiwi NRL forward. They have Xavier Willison, who has now played 2 NRL games. He is an absolute man-mountain from Hamilton, fresh out of finishing high school on the Gold Coast last year. And also TC Robati is on the bench for the Broncos. He's a Porirua Vikings junior out of Wellington who made his debut a few weeks ago. So the Broncos have 3 of their young Kiwi NRL forwards on deck, Ricky, Willison and Robati, who are all extremely good at rugby league. And then you've got Naufahu White making his debut for the Roosters. Then we also have that game, I think, is on Friday night. And then the early Saturday game, Griffin Niami has been named on the bench for the Cowboys. He is from Greymouth. And the big trend from the Cowboys is how they recruit players from around Aotearoa, from a lot of the regions outside of Auckland. And Griffin Niami is one of those players from Greymouth, been in the Cowboys system for a few years now since leaving school, and he's on the bench. He's had, obviously no reserve grade footy last year, so that was shit for all these guys. And I think he had some COVID in and out issues, like getting in and out of lockdowns and stuff like that, but he's there. He's on the bench for the Cowboys. Would have loved to have seen Tookie Simpkins play against the Cowboys for the Tigers, because he was with the Cowboys to start this year before moving to the Tigers and then making his NRL debut with the Tigers. But Tookie Simpkins is on the extended bench, so we probably won't see him this weekend. But you will see Griffin Niami, and the Tigers have Kalma Tuolangi on their bench. He's a Glenora Bears junior who made his debut a few weeks ago as well. So 3 debutants this week, which takes us to 16 Kiwi NRL debutants all up, which is a ridiculous number, and a number that is probably going to get bigger in the coming weeks as well, I reckon.
There we go. Well, I said as well I would, after you've done your Kiwi NRL debutants thing, I was going to breeze through some Flying Kiwis transfer season stuff, because it's very much the same kind of buzz where it's just like progress on top of progress. So I wrote an article last Friday about how, with the Olympics done, it's been a big off season of international football and then Olympic stuff as well on top of that. You had a bunch of those, there were dudes in that Spanish team who, finished, take Pedri, for example. Pedri, 18-year-old Barcelona midfielder, played almost every game for them last season, or, a very high percentage of games for Barcelona last season. Finishes that, goes straight to the Euros with Spain. Goes deep in the Euros with Spain, playing pretty much every minute for them along that journey. Finishes that, goes straight to the Olympics. Goes and plays a whole bunch of Olympic football for Spain, who also goes semi-deep in that tournament. And then, soon as that's done, he's back with Barcelona, and they're almost about to start their next season. No praise. I'm assuming he'll get 2 weeks off or something, and maybe miss the first couple games of La Liga season or whatever, because that's obligated on for players. They have to have at least some little bit of an off season. But point being, everything condensed, everything suddenly season's about to start. I get the feeling there's going to be a big ramp up in transfer business now as we come into the last few weeks of the European transfer window. There's a lot of Kiwi players who can be swept up in that as well, just the way things are going. And that's what the article I wrote about post-Olympics was on, sort of a primer for that. And now here we are a week later, where we've had a couple of W League re-signings, Liz Anton and Claudia Bunge, both returning to Perth Glory and Melbourne Victory respectively. Couple, 2 players who played pretty much, I think they might have actually both played every minute for those teams last season. Bunge, obviously, with the Victory, was a W League champion at her first attempt in the league as well. So great to see them re-up in there, and great opportunities that come out of playing in W League, that's for sure. You only have to look at how many players have been signed in England in particular, but also there's a nice little sort of, because of the way the calendars work, there's a little bit of sort of a simpatico thing going on with the American League as well, and since a couple of the Scandinavian ones. So great opportunities there, and then also incredible opportunities for an elite, for example, going to West Ham United. This is she's not necessarily going to go straight into starting goalkeeper status, but she'll be something she should be the backup, because their starter is Mackenzie Arnold, who's the backup for the Australian national team. And then they had an Irish goalkeeper as well who has left for Everton. So Leek comes in, probably be the backup there, should get at least some cup games along the way. Pretty high standard to be starting your professional career off. She's obviously been one of the most primed prospects in the football ferns for a number of years, since I think making her international debut at 16, and obviously starring in that under-17 World Cup as well, and done a little bit of time at university in America, but the pandemic kind of ruined that. So now she's gone pro in West Ham. Fantastic opportunity, working with Ollie Harder as well, who's Kiwi-born coach of West Ham. Probably a dude who isn't as well known as he should be, because he is New Zealander of German parentage, but he started all his football coaching career in New Zealand, but left fairly young, like sort of university age, to go to America, got in that system, has coached in Norway, has coached a little bit in China, I think, since then, has been coaching West Ham since December, and he's already scooped up a Flying Kiwis prospect, which is beautiful. And then the other big deal transfer here is bit of a crazy one, is Gianni Stensness going to Viking in Norway, where he hooks up with old mate Joe Bell, and a little bit of a resurgence of that midfield partnership from the Under-20 World Cup 2 years ago, the Under-20 World Cup, in which New Zealand faced Norway in the group stages and beat them 2-0. Joe Bell's performance in that game was a large reason why he got signed by Viking. Gianni Stensness also scored the first goal, which was an absolute pile driver from about 25 metres out. So safe to say that they probably had their eye on that dude as well. And then you see how well he went at Central Coast Mariners last season. See how well he did playing in a central defensive role for the Ollie Whites at the Olympics. Chuck that versatility into the mix of what you already knew about the dude. And that's a pretty handy signing right there. And it's a pretty cool one as well to see two dudes at the, Stensness and Bell linking back up at club level as well, which is nice. It sounds like Stensness is probably being looked at more as a central defender, which is also very good because it means he's not competing for a spot with Joe Bell. It also means Viking have had a habit. I think 3 of their last 4 games have ended 3-2 one way or the other. So they've had a habit of scoring goals. That's not been a problem. Also conceding a lot of goals. So a bit of extra defensive cover would not go astray for that team. And yeah, there's 4 pretty high profile, 2 especially high profile signings that have already happened since I started keeping track of Flying Kiwis transfer season. And suffice to say, there's plenty of time for more to be following over the next couple of weeks as well.
Which of the Wellington Phoenix signings is more interesting to you? Nick Pennington, who comes via Italy, or Callan Elliott?
Definitely Pennington, for a couple of reasons. We sort of know what Elliott offers. He's played, I think, 8 or so times for the Phoenix before when he was at the club, before he had his year in Greece. There is a lot of intrigue about that one because Tellai had done an interview where he said that he wanted to move Tim Payne back to right back and strengthen that role, and then probably sign another import centre back, I would assume, to partner Stephen Taylor in the middle. Signing another right back doesn't suggest that's going to happen. Probably means the Taylor Payne partnership is safe, which is all good. They were very, very good together towards the end of last season. It's more about whether you're getting enough production from the right back role between Elliott and Fenton, and maybe it's a bit hard to say. We didn't actually see a huge amount of Elliott at the Olympics. He kind of alternated with Dane Ingham on the right, and it was sort of felt like probably the weak link in the squad was that position. At club level, we should see more of the improvements Elliott will have made from a year in Greece. So that has the potential to be a lot funkier, but I think this Pennington signing is right now this is a dude who is he has intentions of playing for Australia. He's played at under-23 level. He wasn't in their Olympic squad, but he was in the wider squad before the Olympics. So played a few games for them then. Wants to be an Aussie international. His dad was born in Perth, so I think he himself was born in Rome, and has grown up in Italy. Italian mother, come through the system at Cagliari, I think, and then moved to Serie C team, so 3rd tier. Same level that Nico Kerwin's playing at these days. Also the same level that Reno Piscopo was signed from, which is quite an interesting one from that point of view, that I would imagine the 2 Italian-Australian guys in the wider Olympic scene probably got on all right, and I would imagine Agent Reno might have had something to do with getting this signing over the line, but the similarities with Piscopo are in the sort of off the field thing. The similarities on the field are a little bit more, I think, potentially a little bit more Cameron Devlin. He's not the same kind of player. From what I see, you're not going to get some bombastic, hugely energetic defensive shield of a midfielder. You're getting a central midfielder who is better on the ball, though, someone who's more creative, who does score a few goals, who certainly sets up quite a few as well. And arguably you can make the case that as good as Devlin was for the Phoenix in his time there, maybe that more well-rounded midfield, like specifically as a passer and a creator, that kind of midfielder is maybe more valuable to the team in the long run. Either way, it seems like it certainly seems like a signing where there's no risk, because you've got Clayton Lewis, you've got Alex Rufus still as well, who can play midfield. You got a couple what do you call them, international roster spots still open as well, so you can always just sign another import midfielder. But so there's very little risk to this signing, and there would probably be pretty high reward, and it does fit in quite nicely with a lot of the excellent scouting that the Wellington Phoenix team have been doing for their transfers over the last probably 3 seasons, where like Devlin is one of those guys who was given his opportunity in the A-League by the Phoenix. Piscopo's another one who I don't think has fully blossomed in the way that Devlin did yet, but this is the 3rd year of his 3-year contract. He had an injury-plagued season last time, so I'm hoping for big things from him this time around. He's certainly shown flashes of what he's capable of. And then you look at like Clayton Lewis is another one who was given an opportunity, done well, and then the import signings like Hemed and Devere, who have gone on to other A-League clubs now, which just shows like how well the Phoenix are doing. That other clubs are looking to poach get those secondary scouting reports, poach the dudes that the Phoenix have already signed, because they tend to be pretty good at finding the right guys. And so with that in mind, knowing how well they've done in recent years with those kind of things, that just adds another layer of spice to the Pennington signing. So I am actually quite excited to see how that goes and what kind of a player he looks like, and how well he fits into the Phoenix. They've still got a few more signings to come as well. So hopefully now that things are getting a little bit clearer in terms of how the preseason is going to progress, not a lot clearer in terms of certainly not FFA Cup or even like the start of the season. Still a lot of murkiness about that, given the situation in Australia. But the coaches and everything and players, most of the players, not all of them, but most of them are back in New Zealand now. Should be out of quarantine for a big old session on Monday, which will ramp up the numbers, which they've been gone for about 2 weeks with just limited numbers, just whoever happened to be available. Should get back to something closer to like most of the full team by Monday, and that's when things will start ramping up again. So yeah, still 2 months, 2.5 months actually away from the start of the A-League season. So there's a way to go yet this time, and there are still about 4 to 7 signings that they need to make. But they've got the bulk of a nice squad, and despite interruptions to start things, they're probably still in a better state than they usually at. Like the Phoenix are used to starting preseason with 7 or 8 players. Like that's no dramas for them. Not usually because that many players and then some are trapped overseas and unable to get there in time, but usually just because they have only signed 7 or 8 players. So it's the same thing but different circumstances for the Phoenix, and just really hoping that they're not going to get stuck in Wollongong for another year, to be honest.
I've got a question for you, and I need you to just tap into your imaginative powers here. The Blackcaps are playing at the T20 World Cup, which is to be held in the UAE, and I think for the strength of my belief and the strength of my argument, I'll say that this scenario we are imagining is in the UAE. It's in the UAE. New Zealand are playing India. Rohit Sharma's batting. He's got, 15 off 6 deliveries. You have a choice. Are you going to bowl Todd Astle, or are you going to bowl Adam Milne?
Against Rohit Sharma, I think I'm going to bowl Adam Milne, to be honest. Yeah, don't think I need to explain it.
Correct. That's the situation we're working with this Blackcaps T20 World Cup squad. A lot of these selections you can see the rationale behind it, but they also kind of fall into the general trend of Blackcaps selections being a bit weird. Todd Astl's in. We also have Mark Chapman is the other one. So Mark Chapman and Todd Astle both pretty much been selected, I imagine, wildcard because they do bowl spin. We're going to the UAE. And, that's fine. I don't actually... There's nothing wrong with that line of thinking. I'm just fascinated by the priorities of the selectors and what the players do. Like, we have players who are the best T20 players around the world, who are in hot demand around the world for the various T20 leagues, and those players are not Todd Astle or Mark Chapman. I do like Mark Chapman a lot more than I like Todd Astle, but I would still... I'm just generally of the belief that my T20 World Cup squad would have just been the straight up and down best T20 players from Aotearoa, and I think Adam Milne is definitely part of that. I think Finn Allen is definitely part of that, and I think Colin de Grandhomme, just straight up and down for T20 talent, I think he is part of that as well. Milne did get graced with the 16th man spot, which is great for him. Otherwise, it's just a little bit strange. How do you see the World Cup squad specifically? Because we do have the squad to tour Bangladesh, 5 T20 internationals and 3 ODIs against Pakistan, which will then be changed with some of the World Cup players stepping in for the T20 series against Pakistan. We'll get on to that in a second. I'm just curious about your thoughts on the T20 World Cup squad. Everyone else is kind of meant to be there. Not if you compare Colin Munro and Martin Guptill's work in the Pakistan Super League, where Martin Guptill literally shat the bed and Colin Munro was one of the best players. I actually found some stats where Martin Guptill isn't good in Asia, anywhere in Asia. Like, his whole record just falls off going into Asia, so maybe that's something to keep an eye on. But just specifically around the most contentious selections, Chapman and Todd Astle feel like the most contentious there. Would you have those two in your World Cup squad? If you wouldn't, who would you bring in? Talk to me.
Well, I can see the reasoning for Astle for sure, just as another spinner, and he's not first 11. We know that Sodhi and Santner are going to be the first choice spinners. They're going to play every game on this in this World Cup, I would imagine. You don't really need to rest players when they're only bowling 4 overs a game. And just as they play pretty much every game for the Blackcaps, or have done in 2020s over the last 5 years, I think if you looked at like who has played the most since the last World T20, I would imagine those two are at least 2 of the top 3 for appearances for the Blackcaps in that time. Like there's absolutely no reason to be looking at and wondering will Astle be getting games ahead of Santner or Sodhi, because that's just not going to happen. They're held in extremely high regard, two of the best at what they do in the world. No dramas there, which sort of says that I guess Astle's there either as backup, or if you wanted someone to be if you wanted to pick a lineup with a third spinner, I guess. I just would like one day, using those powers of imagination again, like some glittering day in the future, I would love to just not have to talk about Todd Astle and the Blackcaps. Like, it just doesn't seem fair to Todd Astle. Like, how many times has he been picked in squads where he just is not going to play? And not even like 12th man, but just 13th, 14th, or 15th man. Like, this seems to... I don't know how this would be measured. I suppose you can go back and just look at all the squads that have been named for the duration of his career, but just see how many times he's been in the squad with the team and not played versus how many games he's actually played. I suspect it's a pretty low amount, and I think it's going to stay a low amount at the World T20 as well, because if you want a third spinner, Mark Chapman does that. Glenn Phillips does that. probably not Kane Williamson. I certainly don't think he'd bowl himself ahead of either of those other two. But like, not only do Chapman and Phillips give you serviceable spin as a third option, like you're not expecting them to carry the bulk of the overs. They can be one and done if it's not working for them that day, sort of thing. But like, not only, yeah, so it's a pretty, like, it's a relatively risk-free thing as the third spinner, but not only can they do that role, but they're also extremely good batsmen who are far, far better at that part of the game than what Todd Astle is. So I had no doubt they would pick him because it just seemed like the done thing. It seemed like they would, want another spinner in the group. I just think maybe there's a braver way of doing it where you didn't have to pick him and you can just say, no, we trust these other guys. Like, Glenn Phillips has actually bowled a fair amount over the last 2 years. Like, he's going to be in the team anyway as a batsman, and this way we can either add another batsman into the batting lineup or, squeeze another all-rounder in it. That might be the difference between having, like, Daryl Mitchell and Jimmy Neesham or something like that. So, I was under no surprises whatsoever when I see his name in the squad. I think there's a way in which you could have. I don't know that was necessarily the best use of that spot in the squad. So it goes. Go for it.
Here's a stat for you, Wildcard. Glenn Phillips has bowled more deliveries in England this winter than Todd Astle and Mark Chapman did in T20 cricket last summer combined.
That's very interesting. I mean, we saw a lot of Glenn Phillips we didn't see a lot of it, but we, scoreboard watching. You see a lot of Glenn Phillips's name popping up during the county tour stuff, and it still does because he's playing 100 at the moment, isn't he? But like, where was he? Gloucestershire, I think, or one of those types of one of those teams anyway.
Yes.
And he would be playing like. He legit went through a spell of like a week or two where he would play, he'd play first 11 and bat high up in the order, and I think sometimes he might have even kept a few times as well. And then he'd play a second 11 games where suddenly he'd be bowling a lot. And I'm guessing, like, Glenn Phillips, for one thing, is one of those dudes who just loves to play cricket and is going to play as much of it as he possibly can. And if they're like, you want to double up between first and seconds, he'll probably say, sweet as, I'm here on tour, I'm going to have to quarantine when I get back, I might as well make the most of it. And at the same time, though, it also kind of looked like he might have just been like, this is an opportunity to work on my bowling. There is a World T20 coming up. I want this, like, feather in my cap. So he legitimately has put a lot of work into that side of things. And we know Chapman has, because there was a time when he was picked, 3 years ago or something like that, and then dropped. And then Gavin Larson specifically said, we need this top 5 batsman to work on his bowling so that he can be a more versatile option, and that will lead to him getting selected more often. And he's done that, and it's actually worked. The other guy who I think maybe, like, while we're on that line of thinking about Todd Astle, I wonder how much, because he is in the other squads. He hasn't actually played full international cricket for New Zealand at all, but played a lot of A cricket in which he has bowled a lot, and he's definitely been a factor of his game that has been talked up quite a bit. I wonder how close Rachin Ravindra came to selection for this. It would have been a big bolter thing, but then having said that, Todd Astle, he may be a lot more experienced, but I think he's only played about 4 international 2020s. So it's not like he's exactly well versed in the format at that level. But yeah, I wonder if Rachin Ravindra might have come into close consideration as well, even though it would have been like accelerating the development for sure. But like, man to man, I don't know you'd lose a lot by having Ravindra in over Astle either, and again, much better batsmen. So, not that Todd Astle's a bunny or anything, he's not going to bat in your top 6 for sure in a 2020, like, no way that's happening.
Usually, like, I've used this argument, like, with Ross Taylor, I've used this argument with Benji Marshall, and I tend to err on the side of, in a World Cup, in a major tournament, you want your backup options to be ready to go. You want them to step in and contribute when called upon, so there's no dip in performance. So from that angle, everything about Todd Astle being selected makes a lot of sense, considering like he's obviously I don't think it's rocket science. Like, Gary Stead loves him. They're from Canterbury. Gary Stead would have coached Todd Astle at Canterbury. Probably might have played with Todd Astle maybe back in the day, because Todd Astle is a legit like 34 years old or something. So I don't know, I feel like I'm contradicting my beliefs here, because Todd Astle is he isn't perfect. He is a good option in that instance. Like, he's an experienced cricketer. He bowls spin in apparently conditions that are going to favour spin. He bats a bit. He's just a good, experienced T20 option to have in the pocket. Say if like this was, maybe, I don't know when Nathan McCullum retired, but like if you had Santner and Sodhi as your leading spinners, you want someone like Nathan McCullum behind them. So if he does get called up to like, Santner can't play this game, cool, Nathan McCullum's going to play, and he's going to do an adequate job that isn't going to see a massive drop-off in performance. So that is good. I don't really view Todd Astle in that category. Like, he's played 4 T20 internationals, and he doesn't play anywhere in the world for T20 cricket. Like, I just don't really see it, but I'll be happy to be proven wrong with him. And then you get to Rachin Ravindra. So the alternative would be you do what the test team did, and you bring Rachin Ravindra along for the experience and hope that you don't really have to use him, as opposed, like, it's an interesting shift in mindset. Like, we've got Rachin Ravindra here for the experience. We hope we don't really have to use him, and he can just be tucked away, learning, practicing, being around the environment, as opposed to, let's go with Todd Astle because we might need him. I think you can have, if you have this, like, we're going to a T20 World Cup, you can have two different mindsets about that position. Just like, we probably won't need him, so it's all good, versus, you never know, we might need him, so let's insert him there. I would have just not really gone with that extra spinner. That's where I get into like the Adam Milne. It's not like, so when I'm thinking, that's why I asked you, actually, to bring it back around, that's why I asked you about the question, Adam Milne versus Todd Astle versus Rohit Sharma. It's not about spin or seam. And my initial scenario I was creating was any conditions. You name the conditions, Todd Astle versus Adam Milne against Rohit Sharma, who do you want? And I was like, well, let's make it spin conditions just to make it more fun. Because even in these conditions, like, yeah, you can draw upon, Glenn Phillips might bowl, Kane Williamson might bowl. Do we need the spinners to, like, bowl that when you have, this is a unique scenario. Like, first and foremost, you've got 2 really good spinners, so you can play both of them, you can play one of them. That's all good. Then you also have a really good crop of seam bowlers who have done this thing quite a lot. And by this thing, I mean T20 cricket in these conditions. Southey and Bolt have played in the IPL. Jamison's coming from the IPL. Ferguson's coming from the IPL. Neesham's coming from the IPL. All these dudes know how to execute what they do best, seam bowling, in this condition of T20 cricket in the subcontinent. And UAE is a bit more Middle East, so it gets a bit, like, I always want to say Asian conditions, but UAE is like Middle Eastern, and then you're like, well, we're in Middle Eastern conditions, there's only one country, like, I don't know. So that's where I get, like, instead of Todd Astle and Rachin Ravindra, or Todd Astle, Cole McConchie, Rachin Ravindra, whatever it is, I would have just seen, let's just play into, like, what we do best. We have some of the best seam bowlers in the world. Like, you can have a group of seamers, Milne, Ferguson, Bolt, Jamison, Southey. They're all pretty damn good seam bowlers who will get the job done. And I'd chuck Colin de Grandhomme in there, even though it's like, you look at his T20 bowling, it's not that flash. But he's just a cricketer I want in that group. And then even like Hamish Bennett. Hamish Bennett is good at T20 bowling in Aotearoa. I'm not saying he should be in the World Cup squad, but just going back to like what we've seen from him in Aotearoa for the T20 team, he's good because he's Hamish Bennett, the 40-year-old burly seamer with a full bag of tricks. Like, to me, that's what it's about. It's about the bag of tricks. Is Adam Milne and his bag of tricks a better bowling option than Todd Astle? That's where things get interesting, because I think, and again, this is a unique scenario, because I actually think this group of bowlers that the Blackcaps have, seam bowlers, is extremely skillful. We've seen them swing the ball both ways in Test cricket. We've seen all sorts of variety with their slower deliveries, their change-ups, their dooseras as seam bowlers. And I think they are perfectly equipped to come into a T20 World Cup and do damage. Like, what are you doing different? By carrying these kind of mediocre spinners who can also bat and who can also field, I kind of get the feeling that you're doing what other teams want you to do, as opposed to what is the strength of Blackcaps cricket right now. Well, Milne, Southey, Ferguson, Bolt, Jamieson, Neesham, they're all, best T20 bowlers around the world. They're all getting gigs. Southey could get a gig if he wanted to. And that's where the strength of the team is. And that's where I think they should have played into it, as opposed to like covering their bases with like just mediocre spinners, really.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned earlier Nathan McCullum, because I think he's a pretty good, like a pretty important piece of context here to consider, like the way his career went. And I can't remember exactly when he retired, but I know he was at the last 2020 World Cup, and he was bowling as the third spinner in India alongside Sodhi and Santner, which was like sort of the tournament where Sodhi and Santner like sort of came of their own in 2020 cricket, and they've been in the team ever since. And when we talk about mediocre spinners that are like as the next options up, we're definitely not talking about those two. Like, those two are world class frontliners. No dramas there. But McCullum wasn't just in the squad as the 15th man in the thing. Like, he was playing games and he was bowling very well. He was actually opening the bowling, I'm pretty sure, in a lot of those games. Definitely, it was a trick that he played quite often in his 2020 career, as he would open the bowling and try sneaky things like that. So that is, that gets a little bit tricky if you try to consider how the Blackcaps would fit a third spinner into the 11 like that. It would, in that case, have to be Glenn Phillips, I would imagine, because otherwise you're coming in with only like 5 batsmen, and that's probably not going to be enough to do too well in the 2020 game, especially when you consider that, like, no matter what your bowlers can do, you can win a game with the bat, even if your bowlers are a bit rubbish. You can just, like, score so many runs that it's unchaseable, and scoreboard pressure does all the damage compared to everything else. But I don't see how Todd Astle sneaks into a first 11 as a third spinner. Therefore, he's only really there if someone like Santner gets injured or something. He's had a couple injuries in recent times, so it's a possibility. But I mean, skeptical. And I think the way to figure that out is to work backwards from so where's the squad here? Williamson, Astle, Bolt, Chapman, Conway, Ferguson, Guptill, Jamieson, Mitchell, Neesham, Phillips, Santner, Seifert, Sodhi, Southey, with Milne as 16th man. So, regardless of the conditions, and it is worth reiterating the point you made there as well, like, this was going to be in India, in which case having 3 spinners in your 11 is probably a necessity, even if one is like Glenn Phillips or a Mark Chapman or something. UAE is it's still very much down that same path, but it's not quite as far down the same path. It's like, it's not so much of a necessity. 2 dudes will probably do it for you, but I mean, where are we? Trent Bolt, Lockie Ferguson, Carl Jamieson, Mitchell / Neesham, and Southey. So you can't pick all those seamers, but you're probably not going into, let's assume Mitchell / Neesham will play in bat 6 probably. You're you might be able to get them both in, or you might be picking between one or the other. But that is a seam bowling option there. You got 2 spinners on top of that. Can you also fit Bolt, Ferguson, Jamieson, Southey, Ferguson? Did I say him? Like there's 4 of them there. Can you fit all those dudes into a starting 11? Probably not. In which case, someone very good is probably going to have to drop out. I'd imagine maybe Kyle Jamieson is probably the most likely there. Ferguson's just been an absolute killer with the white ball in recent years, and as long as he's fit and healthy, I would imagine he's got to be in there. Southey's been a leader and a very, very dependable, actually, 2020 bowler, even as his ODI career has tailed off a little bit. Trent Bolt's going to be playing IPL right before he knows what he's doing. His performances in those conditions have actually been very good. Just sort of like reverse engineering it from that point of view, it's actually very hard to get a third spinner in there, and it does beg the question of exactly what you just asked of like, in which case do you need it? Like if you're going to have to drop, like you don't have to pick that dude just because you feel like you should. Because there's actually like more that goes into those decisions than just that, and looking at like who would have to drop out suddenly makes it a thing like, well, do we pick another spinner or at the expense of Trent Bolt? Like, no, like you don't like just don't think that way. So yeah, I tend to agree from that point of view as well, that it doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense. Like just because it's in that area of the world doesn't mean you have to like do exactly what everyone else is doing, and maybe zigging when others are zagging might actually be a beneficial thing if every team is rocking up expecting to face a whole lot of spin. But might even be like picking their batting lineups, arranging them in a way that respects the fact that they're probably going to face a lot of spin, and then here we come with like swing bowlers doing what they do. That might actually end up being a pretty helpful weapon. But yeah, like regardless, like Todd Astle is in the squad, and Todd Astle is, for reasons mentioned, unlikely to play a whole heap. I don't see that as too controversial for that reason, like, just because I can see the logic. I don't agree with it necessarily, but I also think it's a very, like, it's not something that's going to come back to haunt the Blackcaps, because he's probably not going to play a whole lot. I think there's a much more controversial selection in this squad, and I'll leave this with you. I'll, like, dangle the carrot, but I think Tim Seifert's quite lucky to be in this squad, to be honest.
Oh, yeah, I breezed over that one. That does, like, we'll parlay that into some Finn Allen, because I think Finn Allen, look, I've been as dubious about Finn Allen as anyone else, probably more so because I've been so deep in the mangroves about domestic cricket. So when I saw Finn Allen dominate the Super Smash at the time, you'll remember this, Wildcard, it was like, okay, but when he bats in the Plunkett Shield or the Ford Trophy and he's not literally batting with a strike rate over 140, he sucks. But then you get him into Super Smash and he played a few Ford Trophy innings where he was batting with a strike rate over 140 and he's the man. So that's a bit weird. Like, that's just like, okay, these aren't in alignment here. Let's just, like, see what happens, you know? And then Finn Allen does what a lot of other lads have done. So, again, this is a positive, but it's not a ringing endorsement when he's just doing what everyone else does in performing well against touring teams to New Zealand. Like, all this Blackcap stuff is bolstered by lads performing in Aotearoa. Todd Astle took wickets in those series. Everyone's done pretty well in Aotearoa. Like, it's always there. And then Finn Allen, he goes to the IPL. Everyone in the IPL loves him. Then he goes to England, T20 Blast, and he's one of the best batsmen in the T20 Blast. In the 100, he's still one of the best batsmen in the 100. And he's doing so with, like, a ridiculous strike rate. Like, some of his strike rates are 160 odd. Let me just pull up the T20 Blast stats while we're here, because it's like, these are notable. This is a young dude who I believe is now prodigiously talented. Just straight out of Wellington, goes to the T20 Blast, and he's got a strike rate of 159. 399 runs at a strike rate of 159. That is impressive. And to me, having been on that journey from doubting him to being skeptical to being encouraged to now having it front and center hammered into my face that this dude is very, very talented and very good because he's doing this around the world, I think he's the freak talent that you have to have in your squad. And I mentioned Adam Milne, I mentioned Colin de Grandhomme, probably something like Ross Taylor might have been unlucky to miss out on the fucking... He was offered 3 ODIs against Pakistan in the middle of a pandemic. Of course, who wants to do that? Just whatever. Colin Munro didn't make it. All these dudes missed out, but I reckon Finn Allen is the most unlucky to miss out. Because, and that goes into because Tim Seifert, what you're saying, he was pretty mediocre. Again, strike rates. This is the thing. This is, strike rates with Finn Allen, amazing. Strike rates for Tim Seifert while he's struggling, not so amazing. They are well below his career work. Whether it was the Caribbean Premier League last summer, or the Super Smash this summer, or the series against Australia, where he also wasn't very good. Something is up with Tim Seifert where he's scoring okay runs, but he's not doing it the Tim Seifert way. Case in point, the Super Smash last summer, 281 runs, solid, 28 average, strike rate of 115. No one above him has a strike rate below 120. And that's only one dude, Cole McConchie. Everyone else's strike rate is 130 plus. So that's very strange. So you've got Finn Allen, who is literally blasting boundaries in England, impressing people at the IPL. Then you've got Tim Seifert, who's in a bit of a lean patch as far as T20 batting goes, and it's just that's where it gets a bit strange. Tim Seifert's the wicketkeeper. You can see the rationale. Same with Todd Astle, Mark Chapman. They offer a bit of spin conditions. Okay, cool. You can see that. The squad, there's not only. Glenn Phillips is a sometimes wicketkeeper, sometimes off-spin bowler, sometimes really good fielder. Devon Conway is a wicketkeeper as well. I don't view wicket-keeping in T20 cricket as the most difficult task. Maybe that's akin to Glenn Phillips bowling off-spin. All these dudes who are really good batsmen, they'll bowl off-spin in the nets, right? We all know it. Club cricket, any level of cricket, there are going to be the dudes who don't bowl, but they're just good cricketers, so they're going to bowl. That's the same with wicket-keeping. Devon Conway is just a good cricketer who can do a job as a wicketkeeper, and as we've explored, Glenn Phillips is a bit of a freak who can do everything. So Tim Seifert's been selected as the wicketkeeper, and they literally gave him the dub K in brackets next to his name. So he's been anointed the Blackcaps wicketkeeper. I think you could have just gone fine with Devon Conway being the wicketkeeper, backed up by Glenn Phillips. You've literally got 2 wicketkeepers who can do a job there and better balance your team, because that's when you bring in someone like Finn Allen to bolster the batting lineup. All of it which is tinged by Tim Seifert's work last summer. If Tim Seifert had gone from, let me just search the memory banks here, wildcard. He was playing CPL, Caribbean Premier League last winter, and he was part of the Trinbago team, which was stacked. They're just so much of the best T20 players in the world, and Tim Seifert didn't have to do too much. He was part of a winning team, winning organisation. Brendan McCullum's the coach. Coming back to Aotearoa, Brendan McCullum's bigging up Tim Seifert, reckon he's really good. There's a bit of Tim Seifert buzz. And then it doesn't quite happen for Tim Seifert last summer. Wasn't so good in the Super Smash. Against Australia, he really struggled as well. And we're hearing about how the amazing depth of New Zealand cricket, whether it's another seam bowler, whether it's Finn Allen, whether it's Colin de Grandhomme. There's a lot of pressure on these players selected in the World Cup squad, and I think you've got players in form, you've got players playing around the world in the best competitions and the best leagues, and there's just there's better options there. The alternative is that Tim Seifert comes in, he's the wicketkeeper, he smacks boundaries everywhere and it works out well. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. How are you viewing that Seifert selection? And which other characters in either squad do you relate Seifert to? I'm kind of relating him to, how do you get Finn Allen in there? Where you can select them ahead of Tim Seifert, or you can select them ahead of Mark Chapman, or you can select them ahead of Todd Astle. It's all good. What kind of players do you relate Tim Seifert to as far as discussion goes?
Well, it's not exactly the same context as you're talking about there, but I can't help but think about this Tim Seifert thing and relate him to Colin Munro going into the last ODI World Cup, where in the lead up, Munro was struggling for runs. He was opening with Martin Guptill, is another comparison. Struggling for runs, not quite delivering in the way that they wanted him to. He had a nice little spell there where he was doing the Brendan McCullum thing, blasting off from the top and getting the Blackcaps ahead of the run rate from the beginning. The pinch hitter at number one sort of thing. That's definitely since McCullum, that was something after he retired. They definitely tried to find someone else to do that same kind of thing. Wasn't working. He gets dropped. Henry Nicholls comes in and does some opening. But then it's sort of, I don't know if it's just they didn't have enough time to assess if that was working or whatever, and they just panicked and went back. Start of the World Cup, Colin Munro's opening again. He'd been dropped leading into the World Cup, he's back opening again. Then didn't last to the end of the World Cup, and come the final, Henry Nicholls was opening and he top scored in the final. So, and has done quite a good job since as an ODI opener. Whether he gets the opportunity to continue with that or not, who knows, because they never play any ODI cricket. But looking at the scorecard from the first 2020 of last summer, and obviously all of these are a little bit funky because players, just 2020 more than anything, there's always 3 or 4 key players who are just unavailable, not injured, just unavailable. But the first game against the West Indies, New Zealand rocks up with a lineup that goes Guptill, Seifert keeping, Conway at 3, Phillips, Ross Taylor, Jimmy Neesham, Mitchell Santner, Southey, Jamieson, Ferguson, Bennett to close it out. There is 2 of those guys aren't even in the 15 for the World Cup there. Ross Taylor obviously didn't last much longer as a 2020 player after that series, and then Hamish Bennett, who's in the extended squads for some of the what are effectively B tour things. But you had Guptill opening with Seifert. Come the end of the summer, where are we? Bangladesh were the last team that toured 4 2020 series last summer as well. Pakistan and Australia are also playing in between. The third T20, where are we? So no Kane Williamson in this one either, but you had Guptill opening with Finn Allen, Glenn Phillips at 3, Daryl Mitchell, Mark Chapman, Devon Conway didn't bat. That was a little bit of a target, was easy to... that was a 10-over game was what it was, so Conway came in late because they put the big hitters up. Or actually didn't bat. Will Young was also in that team. Southey, Milne, Todd Astle. Good old Todd Astle playing a game in which he took 4 for 13. I forgot that. He got 4 for 13 in his most recent T20. That one performance might have played him into the World Cup squad. Bangladesh bowled out for 76 in a 10-over game. But point being, Seifert was nowhere to be seen, and Guptill was opening with Finn Allen, and Finn Allen did really well. And now we're back to a situation where it's... where do you pick Seifert if you want him to keep? Where do you pick him? Does he open with Guptill and then you go Williamson, Conway, Phillips, or does he come in at 5 and then you can have Conway and Guptill opening, or maybe Conway and Williamson, one or the other, each is as good as the other one, and then Phillips at 4, Seifert at 5, or even maybe Seifert at 6 and Neesham at 5 or something like that, or Neesham/Mitchell. You can go either way with those guys. I'd probably lean towards Mitchell. Towards Neesham at this stage, just because Mitchell doesn't have as much experience playing in that part of the world. But don't really. I mean, I think probably Seifert at 5 or 6 is the safest, but I also think the best option is just Devon Conway keeps, and then you can pick Mark Chapman perhaps at 5, or it would have been if Finn Allen was in the squad, it would have been a nice easy way to just say Guptill and Allen open the batting, and then Williamson, Conway, Phillips sorted all-rounder next, and then couple spinners, and then whichever frontline seamers you want to pick. It's a little bit complicated by the fact that they've gone back to a player who wasn't performing and who hasn't actually played his way back into contention. It's not like he's gone away, scored a heap of runs, been reselected. That's not what's happened here. It's exactly the same as this situation with Colin Munro before the last World Cup, and we saw how that ended. It ended with Munro continuing to not score runs at the World Cup, and this feels like it might be something similar. I also Tim Seifert wasn't the best gloveman by any stretch. Like he got picked ahead of other very good wicketkeeper batsmen for the 2020 side because he has like some insane skills as a batsman. He can score all round the wicket. He can hit the ball very hard. Very good eye. Those kind of things. McCullum-esque skills, you could even argue. However, his keeping itself wasn't fantastic. He's made big strides, like definitely over the last 2 years. He's become a much better gloveman. I still don't know if you lose a whole lot having Conway there. And as you say, like wicket keeping in 2020s, there is a lot. There is a lot that you just don't have to do compared to what wicket keeping in Test matches or ODIs is. Like you're not going to be facing a ball that's swinging around corners and having to deal with that, and you will have a few more like, can you run someone out with your gloves on kind of situations or whatever. But there's not a lot of catches behind the stumps that happen in 2020s. It's a bit different. Anyone should be able to catch a high ball that's dropping when you got the gloves on, kind of thing. I don't know. I don't see any reason why Tim Seifert nudges into the first 11 there. In which case, I don't see exactly where he fits in the squad. But also at the same time, like if he's not in the first 11, I think there are batsmen shy because they haven't really picked another player for that role, unless they're thinking of doing something with Mark Chapman that we haven't seen yet. But also Mark Chapman is a very good player. Also hasn't necessarily scored a bulk of runs for the Blackcaps yet. He hasn't had an opportunity to play like a long extended run in the team or anything because it's so hard to get places in these squads. But no, I won't make a Todd Astle joke because Todd Astle has done well enough to get himself into the mix. It's not his fault that he keeps getting picked but doesn't get to play. Like he's almost there but not quite. I don't really know how that balances itself out, but I don't know. What would you be thinking for the top 5? Like what's from the squad that has been named? You could name your alternative from players who aren't in there as well if you want, but what would you go with as a top 5 for the first game of the World T20? What would you be thinking?
Just while I buy myself some time for that, Tim Seifert has not played a game since 18th of March, and his last 10 games he's got a high score of 24, which factors in 3 Super Smash games, 5 T20s against Australia, and 2 Plunket Shield games. High score, 24. Shout out Tim Seifert. I think he was part of the IPL this year, but didn't play. And then, COVID struck, so unlucky. Let's see here. I think this goes back to like the roles these players are given, because like there's no reason why Daryl Mitchell can't bat top 5. Absolutely no reason. So if you're asking me for my favorite top order batting lineup from the squad selected, I'd go Conway, Williamson, Phillips, Mitchell. Then we'd start to look at the I guess you chuck Nisham in there, which gives you, that's 5, and then you just need a couple of the all-rounders. So I guess, Conway's my wicketkeeper. Santner Sodhi is 2 more. So now we just need 4 more. You got Southey, Bolts, Jamieson, and Ferguson. So you asked me for a batting lineup, I'll give him my whole fucking team here, mate. Conway, Williamson, Phillips, Mitchell, top 4. Nisham, batting number 5. Then you can go with Santner and Jamieson in those lower middle order slots, and then you've got Sodhi, Southey, Bolt, and Ferguson. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 players, so that means no Guptill.
I think you had about 8 bowling options there too.
No Seifert, and Astel's going to stay at the hotel.
Astel and Chapman, yeah. I mean, it might be the safest place, but rough. See, I think you're committed to Guptill at this point. I don't. I understand all the arguments about his form's been up and down the last year or two, and these are not the best conditions for him, where traditionally he has struggled. Domestic form around the various leagues has been pretty much shocking, but I think you kind of, I don't know, I think he means a bit too much to that team, and I think you're kind of committed to him as an opener at this point. You just need to have someone steady next to him, which is why I think, Conway or Williamson is perfect for that role, and then the other one, whichever one is an opening, comes in at 3, sweet as.
Well, who are your openers? Who's opening with Guptill?
This is the problem. This is the problem, because they've left to make me step off the fence. I think I would go with Conway. Take the left-hander, and Williamson can bat at 3 because he's sorted wherever he comes in. Then Phillips would be at 4. Then if it's me, I'm going to have to pick Chapman there. This is what I'm saying, is I think they're a batting option in the squad short. But I'd take Chapman at 5. It's either him or Seifert. And then Nisham / Mitchell at 6. I'll go Nisham, but again, I think you're very close to tossing a coin for those guys. But I do quite like what either of them offer as like a death bowler as well, which is a skill that no one else really has. I think Nisham in particular, because he's got a nice slower ball, is just roll up there. He knows he can get smashed sometimes, and he will get smashed sometimes. That's kind of the job. But he can also take 3 wickets in an over sometimes without even bowling that well, but just because he's got nice variations, he can he sort of accepts the role that he's given there, and I think he can do that job. You've obviously got the spinners, brings you to brings you to 8, and then Ferguson, Southey, Bolt. Southey, Ferguson, Bolt in that order, I would say. I think a decent 11, all things considered. We've just spent 45 minutes talking about, complaining about some of the selections. I think both of the teams that we've picked are pretty strong.
I reckon my team's a lot stronger than yours.
Well, you've definitely got more bowling options, but I've got an extra batsman.
Yeah, Mark Chapman. Congratulations. Wait, where did you have Seifert? Guptill, Conway, Williamson, Phillips.
I did not. Conway's keeping.
Right, yeah, sweet.
But they really, I don't know. This is what, even, dare I say it, I don't think they want to go back to the well there, but it's Ross Taylor wouldn't have gone astray in that squad. I'm just gonna leave that one out on the line as well.
Yeah, we can do the Ross Taylor, we can do the Colin Munro, but we get down a
Colin Munro
a rather depressing road down that route.
It is what it is.
Yeah, when you lay it out like that, there's I didn't even think about Seifert as a whole. I didn't really think of some of the holes that could be in the lineup. I'm going to be really interested with what does happen with Mitchell, because I do have this idea of the lack of value in T20 league performances, which I think is I can only use that as a factor in one format. I can't say Finn Allen should be opening the batting for the Blackcaps ODI team. It doesn't work. T20 cricket, if we're building a T20 World Cup, we need the best T20 players from New Zealand, not the cricketers from New Zealand who everyone likes. Let's put them in the T20 team. No, look around the world and give me the best T20 players. It would be like the All Whites saying, we're going to play a game of football, but we don't value what Joe Bell is doing over in Scandinavia. We've got a dude in New Zealand who we think can do the job. That's ridiculous, right? I believe, yeah, exactly. So Daryl Mitchell has been really good in England. Yet you don't even have him in your team. And I can see how the Blackcaps will not have him playing first 11 cricket. Where Daryl Mitchell, to me, because I've been deep in this, right? So I've been riding the Kiwi County Tour. I've been following these lads. I've been tapped into Glenn Phillips and his excellence. Glenn Phillips has to be first 11 every game. He's just ridiculous. So, Mitchell is another player who is in that bracket. Same with Finn Allen. So I'll be fascinated to see what they do with Mitchell and see how that kind of prophecy of the value system, how that plays out over the course of the World Cup.
Well, I tell you what, I'll drop Chappers and I'll put Mitchell at 5.
Why is that?
Just because of your compelling argument. I don't know that it...
Righto.
I mean, I had him as a coin toss with Neesham for the all-rounder at 6 anyway, and I just don't think... Any two out of those three, I just don't think you lose a whole lot with the bat. I do quite like Jimmy Neesham's ability to just smack sixes from ball one. I know the other two can do it as well, but I just think Neesham's a little bit more likely to more often. If you give him 10 chances, he'll have a slightly higher success rate. But I mean, there's a few of those situations when it comes to trying to pick a team, because the seam bowlers are very similar as well, where it's you can't really go wrong. You could easily pick Jamieson ahead of Bolt or Southey, and you might lose a little bit, you gain a bit in batting. It's not like he's gonna go out there and be terrible or anything. There is actually some very good depth to be selecting from in this squad.
We'll just do a couple minutes here on the actual depth. The second 11 that is playing in Bangladesh. I read about this morning, and I had it kind of bracketed it out wild card. So you've got Latham, Nichols. Nichols was in the last T20 World Cup squad as well, FYI. I reckon he's one of the best cricketers in New Zealand. I think he would, if he was given a consistent opportunity in T20 cricket, it'd be fine. Maybe he just doesn't want to play. Maybe he's avant-garde, which is just as cool.
I think he played a fair bit because he was a dude who took a little while to get ready, to get set at international level. And I think maybe I would suspect a lot of his 2020 cricket, that which he has played, would have been at the very start of his career when he wasn't quite... if he hadn't played 2020s before and he came into the squad now, I think there'd be a lot more optimism about him as a possible selection. I agree. I just think, he's unfortunately probably got his chance in that format too early and then has to go to the back of the queue, but I can certainly see him playing more 2020 before he's done.
Yeah, so you've got that group. You've got Latham, de Gronholm, Nichols, Tom Blundell's part of this group, where they're just in this context, they're just second 11 cricketers. They're first 11 test cricketers. They're first 11 ODI cricketers. If we're dealing in the T20 context, they are the tier below, but they're also the big dogs of the group. They're the seniors, they're the veterans, they're the best players, to be honest. Finn Allen, I'm basically talking around Finn Allen being the hottest batting prospect in the world. I don't know if that is true. It's just something to ponder. He is at least top 3. And a case could be made that of players who have entered international cricket and T20 leagues over the past 12 months, Finn Allen has a strong case for being the hottest prospect. So he's, a different kind of category. Then you've got the seamers. You've got Duffy, Bennett, Kugelheim, and Blair Tickner, Ben Sears. So then you've got Ben Sears entering this group of seamers who are, they're like across the different formats. They are all kind of play a game here, play a series there, offer depth. Ben Sears is going to shake that up a bit. Ben Sears has got X Factor, and he is someone who could leapfrog some of those other seamers. Matt Henry's at the top of the pack. He's an all-format seamer, like fringe seamer, whatever. But the point here is that in that seam bowling group, you've got Ben Sears coming in to shake things up. I wrote about Doug Bracewell and Will Young having being really interesting upside cricketers. Will Young is, he could be in that, all format senior group for sure. But he's trying to he has a chance here to jack up big runs and really make things interesting over the coming year or so. Doug Bracewell was similar because we all know he was a really good black cap, fell out of favour, and he's been really, really good in domestic cricket with bat and ball. So for those two, they have upside available to them as players who could really push for consistent opportunities if they perform in this tour. Then you've got the spin / batsman who bowls spin. You've got Ajaz Patel, Rachin Ravindra, and Cole McConchie. Rachin Ravindra is a bit like Ben Sears. He could really shake up that spin bowling department if he can prove that he is like a genuine all-rounder at international level. And that's kind of what I think the main thing here is these players all have a different thing to offer in this Bangladesh league. The senior players, they're the players we're expecting to lead the team. These are the players we're expecting to be the best performers. We expect Tom Latham, de Gronholm, Henry Nichols, Tom Blundell, Matt Henry, Will Young even. We expect those lads to be the best performers. The seam bowling, fantastic opportunity for Ben Sears. If he can jack up big performances, he'll be moving in the right direction. Rachin Ravindra, massive opportunity for him to be one of the best performers. And then, so it's just all these different pieces of the puzzle, and obviously Ajaz Patel could become a factor if he puts in a big series. Jacob Duffy could become a big fit. Everyone has that opportunity available to them. I'm fascinated to see how that plays out from a different perspective to the World Cup. This is a second 11 group in this context, and there is a lot for these individuals to play for as far as playing their role. You want the senior players to lead. You want the young players to come in and shake it up. You want the Will Young, Matt Henry types to, play maybe a bit above themselves so they can show their Blackcaps class. Those little jigsaw puzzle pieces are what make that series and tour quite interesting.
So I have two questions to ask you on this. The first one is just a clarification thing. So they're playing, I think it's 5 T20s against Bangladesh and 3 ODIs against Pakistan. That's the first squad that we're just talking about here. Then there's a squad, 3 squads been named. Then there's a squad for I believe 5 2020s against Pakistan, which follow. And then there's 5 2020s against India leading into the World Cup, which is the World Cup squad that's been named there. So am I right in saying effectively the first leg is second 11, the second leg, the second squad is a combination where you got it guys like who are we from the World Cup squad there? You've got Astle coming in, Chapman coming in, Gupsall coming in, Mitchell and Sodhi all coming into the second squad, so it's sort of first and a half 11, and then the World Cup squad is obviously first 11. Is that about right? Would you say it's sort of progressing seconds to first and a halves to first between the 3 teams?
In a T20 context?
Yeah. In the T20 context, because there are those ODIs as well. Plus, there's a test squad, which is to be named for... Where are they playing tests? India or something, isn't it? Afterwards, but that's going to be named closer to the time for understandable reasons.
Yes and no. Like, Ben Sears is in the Pakistan T20 series, for example. Blair Tickner's in the Pakistan T20 series, for example. Like, if we're playing Pakistan, which is in a similar region of the world, there's Ish Sodhi, Ajaz Patel, Mark Chapman as the spin options, and then they've gone with like really heavy ball seam bowlers: Hamish Bennett, Matt Henry, Blair Tickner, Ben Sears. I just like, yes, to your question, yes, like there is a clear second 11 for the Bangladesh stage, and then they kind of blend, and then they it's someone's first 11 group for the World Cup. It's certainly not my first 11, but it's someone's. Like, to me, the second squad just looks like mix and match. Like, it just looks like they've, like, yeah, it just looks like, okay, we need to play a series over there. Who can play? Okay, you're in. That's what it looks like. That's what the middle squad looks like. The first squad, the Bangladesh squad, and the Pakistan ODI, that section, that looks like a solid second 11 group. The Pakistan T20 squad, that looks like a random group of Kiwi cricketers. And the World Cup, to be honest, the World Cup is like somewhere in between, or a combination of both. Like, it's better than the first 11, but it's still kind of mix and matchy with a lot of the stuff we've talked about already.
So it's sort of like Charmander into Charmeleon into Charizard, but it's a bit more like Charmander into, I don't know, some mangled half-evolved version, and then Charizard, but he's like, you know, when you'd get those ones that would like put you to sleep or paralyzed or something, like Charizard, but someone got him with a Thunder Wave, like something along those lines. The second question I was going to have is just pick a breakout player from the we'll go from the second 11-esque squad, from the Charmander squad. Pick a breakout player.
It's got to be Finn Allen. Like, based on everything I've said, like, it's got to be cool. Finn Allen. Just everything he's done already this year. He's in form. I don't think he's too unfamiliar with these conditions, considering he did spend time in the IPL. And in theory, like, he was in the IPL, so he must not be going back to the IPL. I don't know.
Yeah, all of that gets very confusing. I'm going to chuck Will Young's name in the hat there. I think he's going to get plenty of opportunities to bat there. There's a lot of games, and he's going to be very high up in the order, pretty much getting to play wherever he wants to play, because he's going to be one of the leaders of that batting group. And I suspect, he had a pretty nice start to his 2020 career in the home summer, and he's a pretty well experienced player at this point. I suspect he could score the bulk of the runs for this squad, and I would like to see it, especially if you got like him, like if Finn Allen's going off, and then you got like for the first 10 overs, and then you got Will Young carrying it through alongside him, and then closing it out in the last 10 overs. I think that's actually a pretty nice platform to be stirring from. Like, that could easily be a first 11 platform.
I would have like just said, Tom Latham, just come to the World Cup, bro. Like, it's all good. Just be there.
I mean, he can keep, yeah. Well, and he's one of the best players of spin that the Blackcaps have. I hadn't thought of that either, but that's actually quite a sensible idea.
Tom Latham, T20 record, 77 games, average of 27, strike rate of 130. That is literally like the same as everyone else's in that batting lineup. Like, it'll be similar to Martin Guptill, it'll be similar to not Kane Williamson, but like, if you're if you're averaging over 25 with a strike rate over 130, that is completely fine and no reason why you shouldn't be there. But he's obviously chilling, so all good, all good. We will wrap it up there. We went deep into Blackcap stuff and hopefully enjoyed it. Kia kaha, stay beautiful. Cha-ching!